Welcome to Anchors Away, a podcast for boaters. As a marina owner and Freedom Boat Club franchise owner on Lake George, I get to see every day the joy that boating brings to people's lives. There's nothing like seeing the smiling faces headed out for a fun day on the water and the experiences we help provide and memories we help make as people disconnect from their busy lives and reconnect with family and friends. Our podcast features conversations with boating experts and industry leaders where we discuss things like how to get into boating, industry trends, boating destinations, tips, tricks, products, and more. From beginners to experienced boaters, we hope these conversations will inspire you to get on the water, spend more time on the water, and introduce others to the boating lifestyle. Lee Gordon has been able to combine his passion for the boating lifestyle with his skills as a communicator and storyteller honed from years as a journalist to take on the role of Director of Marine Public Relations and Communications for Brunswick Corporation. Lee manages global public relations, communications, and media activities to support all marine brands under the Brunswick portfolio, including Mercury Marine, Brunswick Boat Group, and Business Acceleration Division. And I don't mean to skip over Brunswick Boat Group lightly. With over 15 brands in addition to the engines and parts group, Lee is in charge of communications for, it is safe to say, one of the largest marine companies in the world. Lee had a 15-year career as an Emmy-nominated TV sports and news anchor for CBS and FOX, winning 25 Associated Press Awards while covering some of the world's biggest events such as Hurricane Katrina, 9/11, and various Super Bowls. All the while, he took every opportunity he could to get out on boats after having great boating experiences growing up in Chicago. I recently had an opportunity to meet Lee and to see him present at our franchise conference as Brunswick purchased Freedom Boat Club earlier this year, and after seeing him present, I knew I had to have him on the show. He didn't disappoint as we talked about what got him into boating initially and the positive impact it has had on his life and his family's life, fun stories from the boating industry lifestyle, some of the key Brunswick initiatives including presenting at the Consumer Electronics Show, and more. Enjoy! Lee, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you giving me some time here. I know there's a lot going on with Brunswick, and it's a really busy time for you, so I appreciate you spending some time with me here. We had the pleasure of meeting last month, and you gave a really awesome presentation to our whole franchise conference. But I do want to backtrack a little bit from your current career and find a little more about your time growing up and how you got into boating initially and where boating came into your life.
Well, it came in pretty early, actually. So I grew up in the Chicago area in the suburbs. And when we're up here where I currently am right now, I kind of made my way back. You only have a few months out of the year to do it. And whenever we were in the summer or in the spring or whenever really we would try to get out. And even if we couldn't get out on the water, my dad would take us fishing, even if it was like by a small lake or on a pier. But my grandfather lived in Tampa. And so we would always go down to visit him, especially around the holiday time when it was really cold. And that was always the first thing we wanted to do was get on a boat down in St. Petersburg and Johns Pass. And it didn't really matter if it was a tiny rowboat or, a boat with a small engine on the back. He was always willing to go and he loved fishing. And so that was always a really good memory. And then as it kind of got older and you get into college, you do it a little bit less, only just because there's different responsibilities. But I then kind of worked my way, lived in Florida for 15 years. So I had the good fortune of living in Jacksonville and just a few miles from the ocean. So it really afforded the opportunity to get out on the water a lot and, maybe 300 days out of the year. Probably could have been 365. If it dipped below 60 degrees, we had our winter parkas on. And that's kind of extended into now, and to my current life. We just, now we're back up in the Midwest and I lived in Wisconsin for a while working at Mercury. And, we got Lake Winnebago around the corner from Mercury. So it always lends itself to getting on the water.
Do you remember with your father and your grandfather, was boat ownership ever a part of your family or were you guys renting boats?
My grandfather owned a couple, and they were never big. They were between 15 and 18 foot. But at that time, we were small, so we thought it was huge. And boating was different, not trying to age myself by any means, but there wasn't these just glorious outrage boats and vantage boats from Boston Whaler. You went on a boat and you had some fun on the water. We didn't own one here, and it wasn't because we didn't want to. It was, we always just said, okay, we're going to get it, and then we didn't. We're going to get it, and then we did it, and then my dad took up golf, and then we went boating, and then, my uncle had a boat, and our close friends had a boat, and And this before you could rent a boat, but there wasn't a Freedom Boat Club at that time. But we kind of felt like we had it because we would always go with my uncle on his boat, or we'd always go with our friends on their boat. So as we were trying to make that decision, because I remember having those conversations with my parents, I really want to buy a boat. They said, well, then we're going to be swapping with our aunt and uncle, or, when we would normally go with them. So it just turned out we ended up not buying one. But I always remember going down and watching my grandfather just work on the boat. And, I vividly remember him catching a fish or cutting a fish and going, oh my gosh, and he just didn't care. It's just, that was who he was. And so those are some really fond memories. Now that we certainly, I don't have any memories of going in an outer limits boat with 120 miles an hour like we have the ability to do now, that's a whole different ball game. And probably something you guys should consider. I think your members would love it.
Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see if the Parks Commission loves it.
Exactly.
Do you remember at what point your grandfather would let you actually drive the boat?
Earlier than my dad was pleased with. I remember it was probably, so we would go down there all the time with my parents, and he would let me sit in his lap, and it was probably 8 or 9 years old, I would say, is probably any time before that he may have. I don't remember. But I remember going there when I was 12 or 13 by myself. And this was in the day and age when your parents could walk you up to the gate and put you on the plane. And then my grandpa was able to meet me right at the gate when I landed. It was pre all the security we have now. But I remember being down there and going on the boat and saying that exact words. I'm like, can I drive the boat? And he goes, your dad's not here? He goes, have at it. And I was so excited. He's like, don't tell your dad. He's like, he goes, or tell him. He goes, I'm his dad, so he can't get mad at me. And I probably told him a few years later. I think I kept that secret for a long time. But no, it was kind of that, people say it all the time, and it feels cliche, but it's not. It's that freedom, that you have when you're in the captain's chair, and when you're 12 or 13, you don't really know what that means, but you just know you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, but really enjoying doing it. And now I kind of have that feeling. We did a media event last summer in New York in Chelsea Pier, and I took my family, I took my wife and my kids, and we had a great time, and it was a friend of mine played for the New York Knicks, and he's got a boat out there. It's a huge, it's like a 40-foot invincible cat. So, this thing's a beat. I'm scared to drive this thing. But my son, who's 7, he was like, I want to touch the wheel. And Lance Thomas's name, Lance lifted him up, put him right in the chair, and he goes, go for it. He's standing right there, and I was standing right there, and we weren't going to let anything happen. But I've never seen him smile more in my life. That turned into our holiday card, that picture of it. And we've done that recently. We were at a Harris dealer meeting in Lake Geneva, and I took them. It always seems like whenever I do an event or go to a boating event of some kind, my family always ends up going with, because my kids are just now obsessed with having a boat and wanting a boat and getting on a boat. And the Harris folks were there, and they were actually doing a photo shoot, and they're like, you know what, we would love to have 2 kids. I'm like, take them. They're yours, and so they're now in the new Harris brochure, and they think that's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's neat. Think of you describing your experiences now when you were young, and that's going to be your kids describing all these stories that you're telling right now someday.
You want them to have something that they remember, and when they do it, they have these fond memories. Like I as we're talking about the fishing, I literally remember like catching this like zebra fish and thinking this is the coolest fish in the world, and then it ended up being bait to go out fishing. I'm like, I'm watching my grandfather with his fish guts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, can I try cutting that? And that was one thing he didn't let me do, which probably for the best at that time.
Yeah.
But I look at my kids now, and things have changed. The access they have, we didn't have iPads, iPhones, Spotify, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, all of those things that took our attention away. And that's what I think what I love about boating so much is that even though they have their phones, even though they have their iPads, they're distracted by just the water. And it's not like they're doing their TikToks or their Minecraft or Roblox or whatever while they're on the water, but they're using it to take pictures and share with their friends.
That's cool. I want to take a quick tangent here because I know I unfortunately have suffered through a lifetime of being a diehard Knicks fan.
Oh,
And I know Lance has that whole fishing team, and he does a whole foundation around, and is a huge supporter of getting young kids into fishing. Is that something you've been involved with him?
very much. Yeah. Lance is one of my favorite people. And now knowing that you are a fan, I'm going to have to introduce you guys because he is incredible. I mean, he is one of those guys that I'm telling you, my kids, my son couldn't tell you the Knicks from the Bulls from the Giant from anything, but he knows exactly who Lance Thomas is. And when the Knicks would come into Milwaukee when I was in Mercury or in Chicago, we would always meet them depending on their schedule. They got in a day early. We would meet him up for dinner. But he is one of the most engaging, selfless people I've ever met, and he is genuine when I tell you he loves what he does. He doesn't have a team right now. Hopefully he'll get back into it, but he has incredible stories. I wanted to ask him about Coach K. I would like, tell me everything about your Duke experience, and all he wants to do is talk about propellers and hole shot and all. I'm like, how do you know all this stuff? And he goes, I literally play so I can fund my passion for this. And I'm like, that's a good marketing line, but it's genuinely true. Like he is genuine about it. And that's when I tell you, this boat is incredible. I mean, there were 10 of us on it, and just, he's got the music playing and big smile on his face, but he's just very, very, very genuine. One of those guys that kind of has everybody eating out of the palm of his hands because he's just that nice of a guy.
You've had the opportunity through Brunswick now to be on all kinds of different boats and be involved in even, development and things, all different kinds of boats. What has been your favorite, and what are some of the characteristics of what you look for in a boat?
That's like saying what's my favorite child, right?
You don't have to give me a brand, but talk
Right.
me through what some of the characteristics you look for.
Any Brunswick boat brand. You know what I look for? Something that I think the most fun that I have on the water right now is when my kids are with me, because you kind of live vicariously through them. And I'm not going to say we take for granted what we do at all, because we don't. But when you go from boat show to boat show, or you get on this boat or that boat, and you're with some of your coworkers, it's a different experience than when you see it with your kids. And we were on that pontoon, and the kids are like, "Oh my gosh, this is great." I will still go back to Lance's boat as probably one of the more memorable, and because for a couple of reasons. One, it was 75 degrees in New York City that day, and we were going 60 miles an hour in the Hudson River, right past the Statue of Liberty, right past the Brooklyn Bridge. Right, I mean, just the scenery in and of itself was incredible, and just the look on my kid's face. My wife was on the boat. Our chief marketing officer and her family were on the boat. We all just kind of had this moment of, like, there are worse places in the world to be at this moment than right here, right now. And those kind of, I've enjoyed from time to time going on an Outer Limits or an MTI. Once we get over 100 miles an hour, I'm like, okay, I'm good. Let's turn this thing around. But I think anything where you can go and just kind of enjoy everything that you do, and of course the technology is fun too. Being able to use joystick, or being able to trim your engines with active trim without having to think about it. All those kind of those tech that make boating better is really what it's all about.
I want to get back to tech, because that's a big part of what I want to talk to you about. But I want to backtrack a little bit first and just catch up to your career and how you landed in Brunswick, and from starting off as a reporter, and were you able to bring your passion to that job for boating, i.e., were you able to kind of pitch stories on boating and the water and all that while you were doing the reporting job, and did that then lead to the career in the marine industry?
It did. Not so much in Billings, Montana, where I started my TV career, but when I got down to Florida, we covered boating and fishing tournaments all over, and I was in Tallahassee and Jacksonville, so we were really in that Gulf Coast region, and there was the Big Bend Saltwater Classic that we covered every year, and we had we were live there for 3 days, and I remember some of the, you don't always remember every sporting event you've been to. I've been to a lot of playoff games, Super Bowls, et cetera, and you remember certain things, but the people that you meet. And I remember doing a story on the kids that weigh the fish, and these kids would be 8, 9 years old pulling off these fish that weighed 40, 50 pounds, and you'd see them like be bending over backwards trying to lift this fish and getting the slime and goop all over them. But yeah, I mean, that helped getting that love and passion again kind of regenerated behind it. And then, you start doing stories and you start interviewing a Marine Max, not realizing that one day that they would be a huge customer of yours. Or, we were in North Florida and South Georgia, and Chaparral is right there, and doing boating stories, and then talking to them and not realizing they were going to be a huge customer of ours one day. And you being in Jacksonville and having the boat clubs right there. And to your question, I think it being in that sports world absolutely prepared, because I don't feel like I've ever left. I feel like this is kind of an extension of that, just without football, which I can do in my spare time.
So back to technology, and Brunswick has really become a leader in this space in the marine industry. The Innovation Lab, Nauticon, some of the other technology things you're doing, and really that ACES strategy that's leading some of the vision of the company going forward, and even to representing at the Consumer Electronics Show next month, which is huge. What is behind that ACES strategy, and where do you see the future of technology and boating going, with Brunswick being one of the leaders there?
I think it all starts with our leader, with our CEO, and you had a chance to meet Dave Folks in Sarasota, and he's an extremely engaging guy. And I worked with him for 5+ years at Mercury, and he was the VP of product development and engineering. And so when you think about every engine, just about every engine that Mercury produces, he's had a hand in creating the look, the feel, the use case for it. And joystick and that's all him. All of it is him. And then he ran the boat group for a little while. So the contemporary look of Sea Ray and the contemporary look of Harris, and so backtrack into that. And he spent 19 years at Ford. So he kind of brings this automotive feel, hence the ACES strategy, which is a very automotive, an automotive strategy, and essentially said, what you expect in your car, and what you expect in your home, and you should expect the same thing in your boat. And if you don't, people are not going to want to go boating as much as they want to be in their house. Or you would never buy a car without you never buy a car anymore where you have to crank the windows. You never buy a car anymore without a backup camera. There's things we've just become accustomed to in our car, and in our house. I don't have the Ring system, but I've set something very similar. When my doorbell rings, my phone tweets, and I can look and see who has probably just dropped off an Amazon package for my wife, most likely. But all of those things need to be in your boat, and if they're not, then it's hard to make that transfer from going from one to the other. And so the reason why we're going to be at CES this year is to show off that, listen, here's everything in a car, and here's everything that's comparable in a boat. Plus, it's powered by 1,350 horsepower of engine and all of these other things that automotive doesn't have. And I think letting people understand, wow, I had no idea. People, we take for granted joystick because we've seen it so much in our industry. But to the typical person, they don't know that you can drive a boat like playing a video game. They don't get that. And so really trying to put us up against the automotive companies of the world and let people see, what we are on par with, or in some cases more advanced than them, is really why we are going to Vegas. And it's a huge undertaking. It has been a lot of fun in the process, and we're going to learn a ton in about a month.
That's cool. You said the phrase, people say, I have no idea, or I had no idea. What are some of the other misconceptions out there about boating, or things that people maybe just don't understand that tend to be a barrier to boating that don't necessarily need to be?
A couple that I've heard from, it's usually my friends who are trying to be funny, or family, where it's they go, what the old saying is. I'm like, yes, I do. You don't need to say it. Is boating's not affordable. I've heard that. And then my counter to that is, well, certainly if you wanted to buy a Mark Cuban boat, it's not affordable, but you could buy a Bayliner, and your monthly payment for that is less than your cell phone bill. And they're like, it is? I'm like, yes. Take a deeper look. Boating is for old people. That's I think a strong misconception, because I think my kids I know love the water. I know a lot of millennials who love the water. We have a lot of millennials who work here at Brunswick who really love the water. So while they may not be in position to buy a boat yet, I think that's where Freedom is a huge player in that, to really I think on both ends, trying to get people into the industry. And then my dad is a good example, where he's 70 years old or 71 years old, and owning a boat for him right now is probably not feasible at his stage of life, but he loves to go boating. And he, when we told him Freedom is going to become part of Brunswick, of course, his first question is, can I get a discount?
So at least he said discount and not free membership.
Right. No, right. Yeah. He's like, can I get a discount? Well, he'll start with free and then he'll go into discount. I think those are some of the big ones. Boating's too hard. It's too easy or too hard to maintain. I live in a cold weather climate, so I can only go a couple times a year. And I think you can make the same argument about golf. I think you can make the same argument about everything, but people do it because you love it. And there's for every argument or every statement, we can throw a counter argument, but it's so important just to get them out there and to understand how easy it is. And you guys make it so easy. I mean, I know it's not just your marketing slogan, but you literally take the hassle out of it. You take the thinking out of it, which is what people want today.
I'd be remiss not to explore the Freedom acquisition a little more and kind of what that represents to you and how that came about and how that fits into Brunswick's holistic, lifelong boating philosophy and strategy.
I think it has not only complemented, but it's allowed us to change who we are, and in a good way, because Brunswick will be 175 years old next year. And you think about the number of companies and the diversity of companies that Brunswick has owned through the years: McGregor Golf Clubs, Life Fitness, bowling and billiards, who everybody still thinks that we are. And to today, we are 100% marine focused, but we've always been 100% marine focused on selling boats, selling engines, selling parts and accessories. I've always said this, and those who understand sports will understand what I'm saying, and those who don't may not. But I always say, when they were talking about Freedom Boat Club, I said, we're essentially, we don't have a minor league system in boating, and this is it. You don't become, again, you don't become LeBron James overnight. You kind of work your way up through it. And you're not 18 years old and buying a $300,000 boat. You need to enjoy the water. You got to like it. You got to have a flair for the water. You join a club. You join a social club. You spend time with friends and family, and eventually you get to that place where you buy a boat. And we didn't have the prequel. We just had, here, buy a boat. And then on the other side of it, we didn't even have the people are leaving the industry. What do we do at that point? How do we convince them to keep boating if they don't want to buy a boat? And again, that's where Freedom comes in. I think it was one of the most exciting acquisitions since I've been with the company, and I think we've only just begun. And I think after that franchisee conference, there was more energy and more excitement from everyone. I knew the boat group would be excited, but the look on the faces of Mercury when they said, "Oh my gosh," and the one thing I said too when we left there, I've been to a lot of dealer meetings and other events. You guys were truly, genuinely happy for each other. Like I've never seen standing ovations at an awards ceremony unless it was the Hall of Fame in the NFL, and like genuinely excited for one another. And that was really, really nice to see.
With your background in Mercury more specifically, maybe you could talk a little bit about what's going on with Mercury, some new product innovations coming out in the next year or 3 years, and what you see ahead for that brand.
Everybody likes the bigger, and Mercury's done two things really well recently on the engine side. One is there was a big hole in that 175 to 300 range, and they just didn't have a product that could compete with the competition. Now we do. The V6 and the V8 is lighter, faster, better in every possible way. And so they started with that as a huge core market. And then there was the 300 Verado, then the 350 Verado. And then last year in Miami, there was the 400 Verado. And then mid-year, there's the 450R. And I think what you're seeing is people want higher, but maybe they want, instead of doing 4 300s, they're going to do 2 450s. And whatever gets you to that horsepower range, they want that. But people have really gravitated to those higher horsepower. And then outboards are everything. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was a completely different story. Stern drives were so popular, so much more popular than outboards, and things have just completely changed. But the other thing that I think Mercury's done really well too is you see over the past 3 years the share gain that they've had at the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, and last year the share gain at the Miami Boat Show, and this year for the first time Mercury had more engines at Lauderdale than any other brand, and they had more than half of all the engines in the transoms in the convention center and at the Bahia Mar Hotel were Mercury's. And that's an incredible statement, because we talked to a lot of boat builders who said, if you'd have called us 5 years ago, we would never return your phone call. And now 3/4 of our booth is Mercury engines. So that says a lot about the product and how far it's come in the last few years.
How many shows do you think you'll be at in the next 3 months?
If we survive CES, if I make it back from Vegas alive, we'll be probably a handful. I think we'll probably usually do. We'll do Vegas. So I'll go to Toronto. I'll probably go to New York for a day. Go to Miami, and then maybe one in the middle. And we were talking about Bass Classic today. May or may not. I haven't been in a few years, but that is a unique, I'll say, event. If you've never been, it's I can't even. There's no equal to it. There's really no equal to it. I've never seen such a passionate group of fans for maybe the NBA Finals. Yeah, I'm like they're crazed for these guys.
We're coming up on time here, so I like to wrap up with just a two-part question. And the best piece of boating advice you received when you were getting into boating, or even throughout your life of boating, and what piece of advice you give to people when they're just starting to look into getting into boating and have some questions about where do I start or how do I get going into the boating lifestyle?
I think there's two things. One of them is a little more sentimental, I guess, if you will, and the other is a little more tactical. But the one when I first started, somebody said, when you really think about it, and I think I said it in that presentation, when you really think about it, you have 18 summers with your kids before they move away, before they go to college, before they don't live at your house anymore. So you have 18 summers to create memories, and you can go on vacation, you can play golf, you can do what you want. But there really isn't a more wholesome way to spend time with your family than out on the water in a boat. And I got goosebumps when I first heard that. I was like, that makes me think, I'm like, oh my gosh, my kids are growing too fast, and I need to get them more integrated in that. And that really stuck with me as maybe the why. I think if there's the naysayers or somebody doesn't want to, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want everything in life. Almost everything in life is worth giving it a try, especially something fun like this. There's no commitment. Nobody's saying, if you like it once, we're going to force you into a $500,000 boat. Get out on the water. Just take all of your worries and your fears and your thoughts about what could happen or why you shouldn't have boat, put that all to a side and go in there with an open mind. And I'd be hard pressed to find anybody that comes back without a smile on their face. And if people are just willing to give it a try, for the most part, you're not going to like it. Whether you join the club or you buy a boat, that's completely up to you. But you're going to always look back on that and go, you know what? That was a lot of fun. I want to do that again.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time. We packed a lot into a half hour here, and we could probably do another half hour, but you got a lot to get ready for in the next couple months. So I'll let you go, and thank you again. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
I do try to keep each episode under a half hour, but I wasn't kidding when I said I could have done another 30 minutes with Lee. We didn't even get to the boat group in those 15 brands and barely scratched the surface in some of the other areas we touched on. Check Lee out on Twitter @LeeGordonBrand to keep up with all the fun things he's doing and working on. And until next time, happy boating.